the pay thing is awkward, but it really shouldn't be. I mean, you know what the average probably pays are in your area, and you know what you bring to the table. And if you're confident about what you can do, I mean, confidence is everything, especially in an interview. Because if you're confident and you say, yeah, I expect to make, X amount of dollars, and you're worth it, well, fine. And some of it depends on too, how bad do they need somebody?
Yeah.
What's the supply and demand?
Have an abundance mindset with all of this, because it can feel like you're trying to get a piece of the pie and the sky is falling and you're panicked because you're a new grad and all this stuff. But if you are doing the right things, even if maybe it takes you a little bit longer to find the right job, but you're applying the things that we were talking about today and really looking for the right fit, it's worth it. And something will come along as long as you keep putting yourself out there and keep going for it. It'll come your way.
Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists. This is episode number 156. My name is Andrew. Michelle and I had a great idea that we've been doing this for a little while now. We really wanted to start engaging some of the students as they are in school to give them a heads up of what to expect as they are getting out of school. And so we are going to start a monthly student roundtable in which we compile a panel of experts from all over the world, all over the country, and they're going to speak specifically to the students. Now, you hygienists that are experienced and practiced, a little bit more mature in the field, you still should listen to these episodes also. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree, but I think that there's going to be a lot of things that we can still take away from it. And go on social media, give us your feedback, and that way the students who are also engaging on social media will have your opinion on the topics that we discuss also. I think it's a really good way to kind of round out that the experience as a student. And so sometimes the episodes are going to be, hey, this is how, this is what you're going to be experiencing for the first month, the first year, the first 2 years out of school. And sometimes the episodes are going to be about, hey, while you're still in school, these are the things that you need to be learning, paying attention to, studying before you get out. You already have a job lined up. Well, maybe you should learn a little bit more about that company or that office before you go in. All of those types of tips that our panelists are going to be presenting. And so Michelle and I are really excited about that. This wouldn't be possible, however, without a corporate sponsor. And so our partner in this is one of our favorites, Paradise Dental Technologies, PDT. You know PDT from all the back episodes. They've been supporting the podcast by providing the free CE for you for over a year now. And so they've come together with us to be the official sponsor for the student roundtables. It really goes to show the character that they have and the commitment that they have to the hygiene community. So you students out there, this is going to be one of the very first tips that you're going to hear on these student roundtables. You need to decide what fits and what feels right in your hands. And it's not always going to be what's in your student issue. And PDT does a good job of making top quality instruments that are ergonomically friendly. And I don't think that there is a better implant kit available on the market than what PDT has. And now this isn't something you're going to hear about while you're in school. This is something that you're going to probably hear about afterwards. So just be open to it. Don't set your sights on only one company can be right. Expand your horizons and see what PDT can do for you. Everyone can go ahead and check out their website at www.pdtdental.com. You can find the link in the show notes, or stop by their booth when you're at a conference and get a hands-on demonstration of what they have to offer. In this episode, we're talking about expectations. We invited 3 dentists to give you all of their knowledge about what to expect as you are going into the workforce. And so listen to what they have to say, take it to heart, and get ready to enjoy your career.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah?
It's time for the interview.
Oh, but I had something else to say.
We need to let the experts talk now.
Fine.
So our panelists for today, Dr. Jason Lipscomb.
Hello.
We have Dr. Richard Lowe and Dr. Sully Sullivan, who you've heard before on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So welcome back, and also welcome Richard for the first
Thank
time.
you. Appreciate it.
So we brought these dentists together specifically today to talk to you, the student, about expectations. There's a lot of maybe apprehension about what to expect on your first day in the job. And we want to make it either a lot better or a lot worse for you, depending on these doctors' answers. So here's the first question. So what are your expectations for a new grad that are maybe different than someone who's experienced or maybe been out just a couple of years?
I try to be a little bit realistic in my practice. You know, I know even with a doctor, assistant, anybody coming out of school, I know that there are some things that they're probably not going to know. There is probably going to be some training involved. Hopefully it's a scenario where you can get in and somebody doesn't have other preconceived notions that you have to overcome, and you can train and get people into your system and work in the way that you want to.
Am I hearing that it's maybe a benefit to have a new grad?
Yeah, it's always going to be a struggle when you don't know when you're coming out of school. Hey, I came out of school at some point. I don't remember that, but it happened evidently. So, I mean, it's going to be a struggle. You just don't have that in your muscle memory at that time. So it's going to be a little bit different. Some doctors don't hire new grads. I know that, and some doctors are willing to do that. So it might be a little bit of a search to find somebody that's even open to that idea when you get out there too.
I've had a lot of success hiring new. We've had I guess 3 new hygienists now over the past 3 years, all of which have been right out of school new grads, and honestly, it's been great. And for one, most of the hygienists now, depending on the state, I guess, come out and they can numb. And that's such a huge thing in our practice. We love that. And, they seem to be a little more willing to learn and do things just because they haven't necessarily been doing it one way the whole time. Like, we take a lot of pictures in our practice and stuff like that. And so, if they come out willing to learn, then it can be a huge asset to have someone that's open-minded. Because, look, I mean, we can teach them certain aspects of the practice. And the beauty of it, that's the big one for me, is just the willingness to kind of see what the dentist is trying to do and kind of their goals, their practice, and et cetera, because, you're taught a trade, right, and a skill and the ability to, see different things and then identify that. But ultimately, what you don't see is the business side of things and that aspect of dentistry. And so, coming in open-minded and trying to see how the business works and what your role in that is, that can be, very important.
So one thing I would say, and I apologize if this bleeds into a future question that you're going to ask, was that if I'm looking at a couple of new grads versus someone who's an experienced hygienist, the experienced hygienist can point to, I was able to produce this, and here's my history. With the new grad, the only differentiator really is attitude and personality. And so no matter what you say as a new grad, it's like hard to know, like, okay, yeah, you think you're a better new grad than all the other new grads, but every new grad thinks they're better than all the other new grads. Unless the ones that really suck, those ones know they really suck. But they're still lying to you.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah. So, but knowing that, your ability to explain treatment, your ability to make patients feel at ease, your ability to learn, your anxiousness to, like, get on board and try new things, that's what I would be hiring versus any skill set. And so I would know that as a new grad, like, that's what I talk about, rather than I'm really good at this, this, and this, and maybe trying to cover up their deficiencies or worried about their production or anything like that. Instead, focus on those things and presenting the best side
So
of
their
yourself.
eagerness to learn.
Huge.
And treat patients.
And just talk with people. Yeah.
And one thing I love in my practice is somebody that says, I don't know. When you really don't know how to do something, say, I don't know. Fine, we'll take that and run with it.
Yeah.
If you try to fake it or try to compensate for anything, that's when the communication breaks down. I don't know how to do this. All right, let's figure this out. Let's move forward. Let's hit the
Yeah, the
ball.
more questions you ask, the more we can overcome things and make progress. So, I mean, it's a huge thing if they do that.
Yeah. And it's not a weakness. Most people think it's a weakness. It's totally not. And it's taken me 20 years to learn how to do that myself. So it's something to learn.
So it wouldn't be annoying to like have constant questions in the beginning from a new grad. That's like trying to figure out your.
I would suggest that your new grad comes into practice, starts working for the doctor. I would be very upfront in trying to say, hey, obviously I'm trying to learn the ropes, how you like things, how we like to do things here, and the questions are going to come up.
Yeah.
How would you like me to approach you? When would you like to do that? Can we set, like something that I wish I'm trying to do more often now with my team members is just find time just to talk and just to chat about
Like
stuff.
a one-on-one.
Yeah, and not like a scheduled one-on-one, like, oh, what is he going to tell me I've done wrong, and like a review,
Right.
but more just like, hey, how are things going? What'd you think of how we handled that, or how was that handoff, or et cetera. And so just because, like you said, the more communication that we have, the better. So I think what's very important to do is ask how the doctor wants to handle that. Because some doctors, like I would be totally cool with just, hey, popping in, asking the questions, but some people may be like, okay, I want to do this at the end of the day, or like don't bug me when I'm, seeing patients, or they want to set time. So I think it's important to be upfront with, hey, I'm going to have questions. What's the best way for us to do
I think
that?
that's great advice.
And most dentists, I think, are introverts, and I've said this.
Yeah.
I personally am, and it's a lifetime struggle. So, and sometimes people like me don't communicate well in the office, and it's not a personal insult. Just know going out there that probably 90% of dentists are introverts. Buy a book on communicating with introverts, and you will be miles ahead of anybody else.
Well, and the word you said was constant questions, and I was like, oh. I do want questions, and I want them to feel very comfortable asking. I also want someone who is willing to take initiative and do their best and figure out solutions, and then come back when that didn't work, or maybe when they still have questions. So there's a balance of like willingness to ask and also willingness to try without asking, and then coming back and forth with that.
And building on this. If you ask that question, learn. It shouldn't be the same question for a year and a half.
Try not to ask that
at
same
some point
question.
you're like, okay, we've already covered this. So
Yeah.
you have
that's
to.
a good point.
You have to learn at some point.
Is the dentist or the business owner the person to ask all these questions to, or can they maybe expect to have some sort of a hygiene mentor or a lead or whatever you call it in an office?
I think absolutely.
I would encourage that.
Yeah.
And to me, when you look at kind of the departments, you have your hygiene, you have your front office, you have your assistants and whatnot. And I'm a big believer in that. I kind of want those areas to some degree run, mentor, teach themselves, right? I mean, unless you're a startup or, at some point you're going to have someone who's been there longer, someone who's maybe been there less time, and someone that's new. And so the hope is that they can lean on and ask a lot of questions to them. And I'm super, I'm very frank with the team members who have been there longer that, hey, it's your job to help mentor this person and teach them. And so I want them to be, hey, go to her with questions and things, because frankly, she's going to probably give you a better realistic answer than I am, honestly, and sometimes. And so that can be very helpful, especially when it's stuff with, dealing maybe with patients or certain ways of wording things, or just, because that's not my world back there,
And be aware that the one thing is certain is there are 5 million different types of dental practices out there. You may go in, and maybe the doctor that's been there for 40 years, and he's had one hygienist the whole time, and it's him and one other person up front. Or you may walk into something that's very systemized, and they have got everything figured out. Those jobs are going to be more plentiful, but you may find a rewarding place in one of those other non-traditional offices, or actually a more traditional office. And don't be afraid to kind of look at those and think you might have a very rewarding career with those people, and be someplace where you're working there for 40 years and have a really well-established family within the practice, And that might not be a situation where you have somebody that's running the hygiene program. You might have to kind of be a little bit more of a self-starter, or you may jump into something with a better system where you have a hygiene lead who's going to sit down with you and say, we do ABC. But that's not always going to be out there. But that doesn't mean it's a bad scenario.
Sure.
We would hope that every place would be like that, but we're building towards that.
And unfortunately, you might also walk into somewhere where you've got the dentist or the owner who's saying, this is what we do, and then when you go back and you kind of look around and see what everyone else is doing, they're not doing what the dentist or the owner says. This is what we do. Here's what we really do. Like, okay, but you can kind of skip that or do this. And so you want to be careful of that, of picking up bad habits from people that haven't bought into the dentist or the owner's vision. So it can be tricky in those situations.
Tarun was on earlier, and he was
Sorry.
That's just
They
saying
make
the guy's
everybody
name. I
mad.
just knew there was going to be some
He was
comment. He was talking about turnover.
Yeah.
And so we're thinking about these new grads, and they want to go, they want to be in the first place that they get a job for the rest of their life. Is that a reasonable expectation, or is it sometimes not the case?
It can be. So, I mean, it can be a scenario. It's all about your mindset. I mean, some people like to work at a place for 5 years, and life is life. Life is going to happen. You're going to have babies. You're going to move away. Your husband's going to get a job somewhere. Stuff's going to happen. It's hard to know. It's very hard. It's hard on the dentist and it's hard on the hygienist, because it's change for me is not good, and change for you might not be good. So I do think it's out there, and I think there are some good places where you can go and work the rest of your life if your back holds out.
If when you're there's two things in this. If you're at an interview, you're at an office, and you're feeling like I could not work here my whole life, that's a red flag. That like
big time.
Maybe you should find another place to
Right.
work. However, there's a book I love called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And my favorite thing about this book is they throw out this idea, the passion hypothesis of just do what you love and your whole life is going to be phenomenal. But instead they say, do what you're good at and get better at what you're good at. And you usually find fulfillment in what you're good at. So then from there, explore the adjacent possibles. So when a new opportunity comes up that expands on what you already have, take advantage of that. So go to an office where maybe you can learn and grow, and there's things there that you want to take advantage of. And then from there, if there's something else that you can move on to, then maybe you move on to that. But so it's not one way or another, I'd say.
So can we expand on the interview part of this a little bit, as far as like you talked about when they show like willingness and eagerness and things like that, but what about like working interviews? How do you find when the dentist is saying certain things, but the reality is not that? Like, how do you discover that, and how do you feel about working interviews? And
so, one big thing for when we look for is it's kind of ironic, because I think a lot of times, and maybe this is just me in our practice, but maybe not y'all, probably, but like to me, when you do a working interview, it's less about making sure you got all the calculus off, or it's less about that, and it's way more about, do you mesh with the team? You know, are there any kind of red flags from just comments that are made, or the way are you asking questions? Are you trying to help? I mean, there's a difference between someone who comes for an interview and just kind of walks around with their hands behind their back and just looks, versus someone who's jumping in there to maybe help sterilize something, or it's little stuff like that. Right. Like those are the big keys that I think for the tipping point for me. Kind of like that's the people we want, and then the team members really, I think, ultimately are the ones that are going to kind of help make the decision, because if you can't get along with the team and the team doesn't, then we're going to have issues. So don't necessarily focus on, gosh, if I'm doing a work interview, I got to make sure that I see everything and got all the stain. Like I'm not going to, and I'm sure there are dentists out there that are going to be like, oh, you didn't get this piece of stain, whatever. And I'm like, well, screw them. You probably don't want to work with them anyways.
Right.
But yeah, so, because to me, you just graduated, or you're gonna get better at that. We're gonna help that. It's the intangibles that I think are the things that really need to shine more.
And you're probably going to walk into 15 different types of scenarios in an interview. You might walk into somebody who's, once again, highly systematized and has a form you're going to fill out and go through everything. Personality testing. Yeah. Or you're going to walk in there and be like, oh, you're a hygienist? Okay, let's do this. And then, okay, you're hired like 10 minutes into it. So you have to be prepared. I always tell people, even when I tend to do like an interview over the phone and then an in-person interview, and I say like, hey, this is your time to shine. If you muck it up this time, this is the one chance I have to figure you out. So this is your time to shine. And some people get in and do it, and some people can't. Some people, if you talk to Sandy Purdue, she's doing group interviews, so you might have 15 other people
I
in
love
there.
that format.
So that is a big thing where you can kind of talk to, and they are actually looking at your interaction, and that's really focusing on what you're actually doing, talking to the staff. So just go in there, put on your A game. Everybody's nervous. We're nervous to have you because it's nervous.
Stressful.
Yeah, it's stressful for us
decision.
too. Yeah.
That's actually a good perspective to have, that you kind of looking at yourself in that moment and how anxious you are, and is it going to work for me? But on the flip side, you guys are just as anxious to bring in somebody that might not work, and then you have to go through the interview process again.
Yeah.
Well, and they should be interviewing us. I mean, that's the thing too.
Yes.
I mean, the reality is you should want to. There's a fear of, oh my gosh, I got to get out and get a job. But the reality is you should find a place where you want to be, the people you want to be around. And so, just as much as we're interviewing you, you should be interviewing us and the team, because like Richard was saying, if you go back there and you see that there's not a lot of respect, or there is a lot of micromanaging, or just something like that, I mean, those are big red flags that, like, you know what, it's not worth being here. You know, keep looking.
So, and one thing that I thought of that you'd kind of asked earlier was, how do you kind of know if it's an office that's got problems or whatever? I mean, go look at the Yelp reviews and the Google reviews.
Yeah.
Look on the
It's a
website.
great idea.
Look on the Facebook page, and just get a sense for what this practice is about, how well it's running. Maybe it's an older doc that doesn't care about all those things. But if there's they have 3 stars on Google, maybe there's some problems there. So just kind of come in with your eyes wide open.
So, assuming that their personality is great, they mesh well with the team, you've hired them on, but you're starting to notice maybe some clinical deficiencies. What are some things that they can do? I mean, I want to keep putting it back on them, but maybe self-starters or things that you doctors have noticed that people can do to get better at the clinical aspect, CE or whatever.
That's a hard question, because honestly, I tend to put a lot of it more on the doctor not doing. They should be really the one that's investing, into them and trying to help them over. It's hard to self-start some of that when you're not getting the support from your doctor. Sure. So that can be tricky. I think one is, if there's something that you notice you specifically struggle at, maybe it's like an area of the mouth or whatever it is, then I would reach out to either the people that you work with, look and see if there's a piece of equipment that can help you do it, or just, I don't know, all the online resources. I listen to the Tale of the Two Hygienists podcast.
Yes. So one
They're
thing.
already listening.
Yeah.
Good job.
One thing I would say is being a less heavy-handed hygienist is really important. And I've been in practices and settings where we all just know that's the hygienist that I don't want to go to, and
Classic.
Maybe getting loops. So say that you don't realize you're hurting people.
I'm a
because
big believer in loops.
You don't see, and so getting loops and light and being able to see where you are and be able to stay above, or not above the tissue, but stay away from the tissue in terms of hurting people. Maybe that could help if someone is struggling and they don't have loops.
So no gingivectomies.
Yeah,
It's frowned upon.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
It's bad for retention.
Right.
Reappointment percentage.
Most of them aren't graduating if that's what's happening. They're not passing their board.
That's good.
Yeah.
You mentioned that sometimes it's good to hire a new grad. Sometimes you'd rather have someone with a little bit of experience. Kind of depends on the personality and the person. How do you feel about maybe if someone was a temp for a while first? Do you look at them being a temp as a good thing or as maybe a negative thing when they're applying to your job?
Temp at your office, or just they've been a temp?
A temp in a temp agency.
I think it could sometimes be an advantage, because if they've temped for a while, then that's a good thing, because to me that shows me they're flexible.
Flexible. That was the word.
Because to be a temp's a hard job.
Yeah.
I would imagine. I mean, you have to go to one office and hear from this doctor and that doctor and this, and everybody does it differently, and then the teams do it differently.
Software programs.
Oh,
that.
So to me, I think it's a good thing. Obviously, I'd be curious. Okay, why have you been tipping? Is it because no one can handle you in large doses, or is it because you want to have super flexibility in your schedule, or now you're at a place where you want more of a full-time job? Like, why are you temping? Because there's both out there. I mean, there's people who are temping because they can't get along with teams for longer periods of time, or they're kind of, and I think they tend to be almost maybe not bulldog's not really the right word, but kind of super type A and like kind of run. They think
intense.
And they kind of run the show and like I don't want that. But if someone they've done it because of a flexibility thing or something, now they're ready to come full time, that could be a huge.
Well, and if you are temping and you end up in an office that you're like, ooh, this was kind of the office I would like, or maybe you had a good experience, or maybe you really stepped it up and pulled your weight and had a good temp experience, maybe get the contact info of that doctor and say, hey, would you mind if when I'm interviewing for stuff in the future, I could drop your name and your contact info?
Good advice.
So then as you're temping, you can kind of build up, even though it's not a traditional kind of experience, you've got something you can bring to the table.
Yeah.
I like that.
Does it matter at all where they went to school or the level of education? So like an AA versus a 4-year degree for a hygienist or anything like that? If you look at that.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I
Like
don't
your
even know.
CV is like I could probably care less about your CV.
I just don't even know.
There's other school options, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was one.
I don't know how it works.
Is that not it?
I don't know how it works.
And look, and I think part of this could be we're both younger we're younger owners,
Yeah.
right? We're both under 40, and our mentality is probably a little different. And so I think it's important that you understand where you're going and who you're interviewing with. I mean, it's just silly stuff sometimes, like being prepared and like knowing the team, reading the website.
Yeah.
Like that goes such a long way because then you're more prepared in being able to. Because if you read my website, you're going to know that I'm really laid back. I'm probably not going to have a bunch of formal questions for you, and I could care less about your resume. You could just probably pick that up. Versus, somebody else may be way more straight-laced, and so that's going to matter on your interview. So the more information you can gather, the better your opportunity you're going to have to set yourself up for
Services
success.
that you're providing, so don't walk
Oh,
in
100%.
and thinking like,
Gosh, do they use
you're
technology?
restorative, but you're really perio? Like that would be a.
Yeah, I mean, or do they have any technology? They have no technology. I mean, there's just a lot of that's important.
Pay structures. You know that's going to be a thing.
Yes.
You know that they were hoping
Yeah.
you were going to lead with that question for all of this. So, what's the realistic expectation from the business owner / doctor side of things for a new grad?
What do you mean?
What should they expect in terms of pay?
Not the high end, low end, middle a little bit.
It's going to be
I mean,
different.
everyone's area is different.
Yeah,
Areas
so
are different.
first off, we can't really give numbers because the hygienist in California gets $55 and a higher
Right.
in rural Arkansas gets $25 an hour. So it's obviously there's a big variation there. To me, a lot of it is what do you bring to the table? Have you had any extra training? Like if you can numb versus someone who can't numb, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
So you're going to probably you have more option. If you have worked with lasers or if you know how to do different things or if you have a good history, if you do all the like pH stuff and microbial things and all the other stuff they're doing now, if you have a lot of more tools in your tool belt, you can expect to be more. I'd much rather start, and let's say it's a new grad who has none of that, right? Because people are like, oh, well, shoot, I don't have any of those
Right.
things. Understand that I'd rather probably start someone at just a good average base pay, not necessarily low and not necessarily high end, but also I want you to be motivated to improve, right? And to go out and learn to do those things and to help build the practice and to help build the business. And so what I don't like is where, and it's always bugged me about our industry to begin with, is that some hygienists come in and if $35 is your area, you get $35 and you get $35 for the rest of your life. Like that's it. You're ceiling, you're done right there. And so to me, I want to be able to find, it's important that you find ways to improve what you do, and if you do that, and if it helps the business and helps the practice, then you should be compensated more.
For me, what I would be willing to pay more for, if someone came and they said, I take intraoral photography, whether it's a wand, whether it's a DSLR, I have skills in taking photography, I know how to talk to patients about treatment, but that's what I care about. And so each doc is going to care about different things that is going to make them decide, okay, where are we going to be on the pay scale and what they initially offer. But, I mean, I would expect low to average as a new grad is kind of where you're going to be in that range and with the idea of working up eventually.
Well, and don't be afraid to say what you think you're worth either. I mean, there's something, the pay thing is awkward, but it really shouldn't be. I mean, you know what the average probably pays are in your area. And you know what you bring to the table, and if you're confident about what you can do, I mean, confidence is everything, especially in an interview. Because if you're confident, and you say, yeah, I expect to make, X amount of dollars, and you're worth it, well, fine. And some of it depends on, too, how bad do they need somebody?
Yeah.
What's the supply and demand? There's somewhat of a leverage thing there. If you're in an area where there's a ton of hygienists, well, understand that you may, like Nashville right now, everybody wants to move to Nashville, and a lot of people do. So there's a ton of hygienists. So the demand's a little higher. So you're probably, the supply's a little higher. So you're probably not going to make as much. Versus if you go somewhere more rural, then you may be able to, if money's super important to you, that's something you should consider.
What about the different types of pay structure, rather, like hourly versus salary versus production-based? What have you experienced amongst, maybe not used personally, but what have you heard that's going on?
And are you saying in regards to what they should look for or want or desire?
Yeah, because, this goes out to all over the United States, right?
Yeah.
So what could they run into, I guess?
I would ask a lot about, I love the idea of growth, right? So I'm a believer that I want them to have the opportunity to grow. So if I was a hygienist, I would want to be in an office that had some sort of pay structure that allowed that to happen, that allowed either had good bonus system, that was, not that I necessarily agree with it, but production-based, because that has the potential for you to be more successful versus if you're a flat hourly paid employee or salary paid employee, there's not a ton of drive to do something. So I like the potential for a higher ceiling, but maybe a little less security, if that makes sense. And some people, I guess, will prefer to have a guaranteed paycheck with a lower ceiling. To some degree, I guess that depends on where you're at. But I think there's more opportunity in a practice that has a pay structure that's set up to take that away a little bit.
I would say that if you encounter an office that has a bonus system, I would ask to say, well, what does this look like in your practice? What does the schedule look like? If there's a bonus system, but they're not filling your chair, and the other hygienists, aren't able to meet these and get the bonuses, what does this look like for your practice? And on the flip side, if there's a bonus system and people are doing really well and they're very well booked, then you're like, okay, maybe I can learn to produce like these other hygienists here.
And those are good questions to ask the team. Do you hit, if you have a bonus based on a goal, do we hit the goal?
Yeah.
Do we actually get the bonus?
Yeah.
All right. I think this will be the last one is metrics.
Okay.
So almost every office has certain metrics. We're talking about bonus systems, usually based on numbers. Which ones should they know about, and should they kind of be studying for ahead of applying?
Reappointment percentage is probably the number one most important to me. Do you keep the patients coming back, and are you getting that appointment before they leave? Obviously retention's a huge deal with dental practices, and so if you're not being retentive and you can't communicate that and get that done, then we're just losing patients out the back door. So that's a huge one. I'm less concerned about your individual maybe production per se, and more concerned about your ability to give patients the opportunity to say yes to treatment that they may want. To really look at the patient as a whole and not just be focused solely on gums.
I would say in terms of metrics, if going back to that bonus system, if you're bonus based on production, what are their fees? And finding out, if you've got two offices and they have similar bonus structures and you're trying to choose between them, but this office actually charges more and has a higher reimbursement versus that one, that can make a difference.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. This isn't a specific question, but I'm going to say anyway, so I think it's important. A lot of times for new graduates coming in, depending on the office, there may or may not be the immediate role of a full-time employee. A lot of times we add hygienists because we're trying to grow, or because you're a startup, or whatever the reason may be. And so I think, the willingness to wear multiple hats early on, when we first hired Kendall, who's one of our hygienists, the first new one we hired, for the first 3 months, she assisted, but at the same time, she was always available for hygiene. So a new patient called, and we always had availability because she was ready. And slowly but surely, she built up to now she's full-time, et cetera. And it was probably within 6 months she was full-time. But, the willingness to say, hey, I'm willing to help the practice.
Yeah.
What can I do to help the practice? It's so important. And that may be answering the phone, returning phone calls, follow-up stuff. And you talk about those kind of those indicator numbers, and whatnot, being able to do recall, those are all things I think are super important that are very valuable to.
And to be able to say something like, when stuff falls through on my schedule, I'm not going to sit there on my phone. I'm going to come help.
Gosh, yeah.
Like, if a hygienist said that to me, that would be like, I want this person.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to knowing what you want as a provider on a day-to-day basis, because that flexibility would not work for me.
Sure.
Because I hate temping for that reason, because I like structure. I like walking in, looking at every chart that I got for that day, preparing myself, preparing my instruments, all those things. I like that structure. But it would be nice to know that coming in, and that's why I think the interview part of it was a really good suggestion.
Yeah, for sure.
Any last messages for students who are about to get into the workforce?
It's a great time to be in dentistry. It really is. I think all across the board, whatever role you do, have fun, enjoy it. Like I said, I would put yourself first and your family and what you want to do. Make sure that it's a place you want to be in, and that the practice and the doctor and the team you want to be around is who you want to be with. I mean, life's too short, So I would. My big thing is really interview us just as much as you're getting interviewed.
That's good. That's good.
I would say have an abundance mindset with all of this. Because it can feel like you're trying to get a piece of the pie, and the sky is falling, and you're panicked because you're a new grad and all this stuff. But if you are doing the right things, even if maybe it takes you a little bit longer to find the right job, but you're applying the things that we were talking about today and really looking for the right fit, it's worth it. And something will come along as long as you keep putting yourself out there and keep going for it. It'll come your way.
And that was to that point, that was one of the reasons Kendall kind of was, she wanted, not that we're some awesome office, but she wanted to work at our office. And so she was willing to take a somewhat of a short-term negative, or what not what she wanted to be doing, which was hygiene full-time, but to be where she wanted to be. And I think that sometimes is, don't delay gratification's okay sometimes,
Contact info, because you guys have podcasts.
Ooh,
so
we do.
yeah.
So I'm Sully, Millennial Dentist Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Millennial Dentist. That's where I'm pretty active.
Perfect.
And
Richard, Shared Practices Podcast. I fail on Instagram, but we do have a Facebook page, and just come listen to our show. We'd love that.
Perfect. And then the one that had to scoot out, Dr. Jason Lipscomb, is with Dental Hacks.
The Dental Hacks
You might have
podcast.
heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind
I
of a
said
big
infamous
deal.
one time. I really meant legendary.
yeah,
Infamous works.
I'd take
Appropriate.
infamous.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that was everything that you wanted and more. I really appreciate the dentists for giving us their time. We hope to see them on a future episode. If you are a student and you have questions, thoughts, concerns, topics, anything that you want us to focus on for you, let us know. You can email us at atale2hygienist@gmail.com, or you can find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram. Be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever your podcasting app is. Please tell your friends, share it. Let all your classmates know that we have something going on for you guys. If there's anything that we can do for you, just let us know. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.